Good morning, America. Welcome back to the Bellum Bros, the only program that discusses the current status of American politics, economy, and social life. Last week, we talked about how John Wilkes Booth is innocent. This week, we'll be talking about how America wasn't as unified as you would think during the Antebellum period. Moreover, while both the economic systems of the northern and southern United States prospered during the Antebellum era, the gap between the political ideology and the social standard of the North and the South widened at the same time, making the extensive developments during the Antebellum period a disunified movement. Now, to start off, there was a particular topic that caught my eye as I was skimming through the weekly edition of the Reader, being that of the recent annexation of the new territories in the West.
The slavocracy.
Okay, moving on. I wanted to hear your opinions on such a fine addition to our growing economy.
Being the slavocracy.
Okay, Joel, this is the second time now. Is there something that you want to say to the rest of us and our audience?
Yeah, I think the annexation of these Western territories, and more specifically Texas, is an ill-suited power grab by the slavocracy.
Okay, Joel, I'm going to stop you right there. Joel,
this do not stop me there. No, it is Joel, a power grab by the
podcast.
You are not
Congress, man.
Calm down. What about your opinions on the acquisition of the Oregon territory or the Gadsden Purchase? I, for one, love the Gadsden Purchase.
Actually, I like the Treaty of
the Gadsden Purchase.
No, I see the Kansas.
You're all
it's just wrong.
Better one.
Yeah, but like so stupid. The Treaty of Guadalupe.
You know what? Our Christmas is here. It was a banner year at the old Bender family.
After the demolition of the Mexican Party.
All right, so now that we've all calmed down, we're going to split up today's podcast into 3 sections. The first part being about economic expansion, the second about sectionalism, and the third about American society, all during the antebellum period.
But Joel, what about slavery? I thought slavery was going to be the sole topic of this video because, well, the South is just known for slavery.
I can answer this, Joel. Well, Andre, while the South surely was known for its heavy use of slavery, there were many aspects to it. There was an economic aspect, there was a political aspect, there was a societal aspect, the list goes on. Point is, slavery was a tree with many, many branches.
Yeah, and I just want to add on to that. You see, many people blame simply slavery for the root cause of the Civil War. Many people blame states' rights to determine the question of slavery, and some may even blame our founding fathers who left the question unanswered. However, what do they all have in common?
They're all about slavery.
Yes, that's right, which makes those people wrong because going off your tree analogy from earlier, those aspects that branched off from slavery turned into trees of their own.
All right. Now that we've established that, let's start with our first topic, shall we? Who's up for some economy?
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
All right.
So, let's not get quite so worked up this time, but what do you think of the U.S. annexing Texas in 1845?
I think it's the South trying to acquire more land to expand slavery.
Yeah, and it's not because they wanted to have more slave states than free states. It was literally because they needed to keep their economy alive.
Right. And if you don't know what we're talking about, with the invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney in 1793, it caused the slave trade in the South to explode because cotton had become so profitable. This means that more cotton gets put into the market, which in a way increases demand, but also increases the supply by so much more.
In other words, this would effectively lower the price of cotton, which means the South would then have to produce even more to create the same amount of profit as before.
And more production means more land necessary for the production, which would explain all the expansions.
But isn't manifest destiny also a pretty big reason for all the expansion?
Yeah, but they also wanted to have slavery allowed in these newly acquired territories and states.
Expansion also helped the economy because even if the new states aren't slave states, they're still profitable because it's just land for farming.
Yeah, that's true. But then how do they transport the goods across the country? Because in order to truly expand their economy, they would have to move their products for trade.
The government realized this too, right? When trade between the southern plantations and the northern textile industries increased. But the internal transportation system at that time couldn't keep up with all the trade.
But the government couldn't even do anything about it. It was deemed unconstitutional by the conservative Democratic Party for the federal government to aid states in state improvements.
So then how did they build transportation routes? Don't they have to be federally approved?
So it would just be proposed by private companies, and they would in turn get money from private investors. And this worked with the Erie Canal construction starting in 1817 and the eastern coast being connected to the western side of Mississippi, Chicago, and the Great Lakes by 1856.
All this was good for the economy as well, because for canals, that allowed for easier use of steamboats, which very efficiently transported goods from the western farming industry to the east. The use of trains also boosted this efficiency.
So I'm assuming this boost in efficiency means it greatly reduced the cost of bringing goods to the market, which stimulated both agriculture and the southern industry.
Yep, you're very right. But I want to go back to the land expansion part of the growing American economy because that ties into our next topic of sectionalism.
All right, what's your idea then?
Well, because America was rapidly expanding, there also had to be transportation to get goods and people from place to place, right?
Yeah, I see you.
So this made Stephen Douglas, a Democratic senator from Illinois, to propose a plan to build a train through Nebraska in 1854. Being a Democrat, he also proposed that the Nebraska and Kansas territories be open to slavery, despite the fact that it is above the Missouri Compromise line.
Oh, yeah, this one. So basically, the people opposed to expansion of slavery in Congress did not like this idea. So they opted to let the territories choose whether they wanted slavery or not, also known as popular sovereignty. And it doesn't take a genius to figure out what happens next.
Everyone in Congress compromised and nothing bad happened.
I don't think so. I believe what happened was that many pro and anti-slavery settlers flocked to these territories to sway the vote in their favor. And with tensions between the pro and anti-slavery settlers so high already, many riots and fights broke out among them. This is known as Bleeding Kansas.
That's a badass name.
Yeah, it does sound pretty cool, but it was from the years 1854 to 1861. So pro and anti-slavery people not liking each other does sound like sectionalism. So how about we take a break right now and go on to our second section after this break.
Greetings, fellow Americans. The Pony Express launched on April 3rd and is in business as the quickest form of delivery with an average delivery time of 10 days. For just $5 for every half-ounce of mail, you can have your mail delivered as fast as possible. The Pony Express truly is one of the greatest forms of delivery created, with adventurous riders ready to deliver mail at any time. The Pony Express symbolizes the West and is a great example of the American spirit we all harbor. The most sophisticated transcontinental system of communication for its time, the Pony Express has shown us that, unified as Americans, we can accomplish anything.
All right, welcome back, everyone. Now let's talk about what is going on between the North and the South, because we're going to talk about sectionalism, and those are the most prominent sections of the U.S. Why did the South want to leave us, and why did we need to go to war with them?
Well, it all started with abolitionism. Simply put, the South wanted slaves, and the North didn't. That's the main reason. Those Southerners just couldn't see that farming and slavery weren't the way to go. The North had a booming industry and didn't need enslaved people to support their economy. All the arguments around slavery led to many Southern states seceding to form their own nation.
Seems like a bit of an extreme reaction now.
Well, for the Southerners, it wasn't so extreme. Slavery was already ingrained in their culture and was vital for their economy, being the only way to stimulate it. and it became even more important with the production of the cotton gin.
Wow. So Eli Whitney was partially responsible for the Civil War?
Yep.
Look what you started, Eli.
Well, it wasn't just his fault. There were various other reasons for the divide between North and South.
Yeah? Like what?
Well, the Missouri Compromise and the Dred Scott case were also pretty big factors. If you don't know, the Missouri Compromise was another issue related to slavery. It was when the state of Missouri was set to be added to the United States, and Southerners wanted to be added as a slave state, while Northerners, on the other hand, they wanted it to be added as a free state. Eventually, the Southerners got what they wanted, and Missouri was added as a slave state. But all of this controversy and debate surrounding this whole Missouri problem led to a larger divide between the North and the South.
Ah. So more slave states means more pro-slavery politicians in Congress, meaning more pro-slavery decisions for the entire country, and the other way around for free states.
Why couldn't they just split the state with half of it free and half of it allowing slavery? So then you get one pro-slavery senator and one anti-slavery senator.
I agree. I mean, I'll never really understand politics though.
Well, it's really not that easy, because back then, people representing their states for Congress were more loyal to their states than the entire nation. So you really can't get one pro-slavery senator and one anti-slavery senator from one pro-slavery state.
My idea is better than that compromise. If I was in Congress, maybe this war wouldn't have started.
I highly doubt that. Respectfully. Anyway, moving on to the Dred Scott v. Sanford case. This case is related to the Missouri Compromise, but happened long after the compromise was signed. The Supreme Court ruled that Dred Scott, who was a formerly enslaved man, couldn't sue for his freedom because he was property of his owner, not an American citizen. This case enraged anti-slavery Northerners who couldn't believe that the Supreme Court had declared that slaves weren't citizens.
That enrage is totally justified, though. That's a pretty brutal ruling.
Definitely. This case further divided the U.S. over the issue of slavery and was one of the final problems leading to the Civil War. Excuse me.
It also made the North mad because it was in violation of the Missouri Compromise.
Yeah, it also made the North mad because the Supreme Court also ruled that slavery cannot be banned in the new Western territories.
So basically, the Western territories are open to the institution of slavery.
Exactly, yes. And it doesn't take a genius to see how this could have led to more tensions between the North and the South.
These tensions were more than tangible too, like Bleeding Kansas, as we mentioned before, and John Brown's raid.
What was John Brown's raid again?
Well, John Brown was an extreme abolitionist who lost a lot of money to gambling, and he led a slave revolt that took over a weapons arsenal in Harper's Ferry, Virginia. That ultimately failed, and he was hanged for treason, him and his beautiful beard.
Oh, yeah. And so there you have it, with various things affecting slavery, including the cotton gin, industrial growth in the North, and the issues surrounding Missouri and Dred Scott. The North and the South became more sectionalized, leading to the South secession and the start of the Civil War.
So, how about we take a break now? And when we come back, we can go to our third topic, American society.
Let's do it.
Do you need more cash in your life? Come work with us at Andre and Company Corporations in our glorious factory. In this industrial world, we are always looking for workers to improve our efficiency. We pay decently, so anyone looking for a day job to make some easy cash, come visit our factories to apply for the job.
Okay, but do you guys remember the Second Great Awakening? I thought that was pretty cool.
You mean that time when there was a push for religious ideals like deism and Unitarianism?
Yeah, like I said, I thought that time period was pretty cool.
So you just like the idea of religious liberalism and evangelical revivalism?
Yeah.
What about those nativists, though? I really like nativists. In fact, I think I'm a nativist myself. Because, man, I hate those immigrants. They really grind my gears, man.
Well, I wanted to focus on the plus sides of the Second Great Awakening.
Okay, let me get this straight. So you think the nativist movement wasn't a positive result of the Second Great Awakening?
No, the nativists were just a bunch of racist people preaching about how America would be tainted and stuff by these immigrants.
Sorry, guys, he does that a lot, but I couldn't help hearing about your discussions involving the Second Great Awakening. Did you know that a direct result of it was a mass movement for education reform, with figureheads like Horace Mann leading the charge to instill Republican values like discipline, hard work, and diligence into the American school system?
Yeah, but that only happened in the North, really. The South didn't really put that big of an emphasis on education because they didn't need it, as they were still in an agrarian society.
That's very true. The North needed it for its booming industrial economy, thus creating a new divide between the educated industrial North and the uneducated agrarian South.
Yeah, especially since in the South, it was illegal for slaves to learn, to read, and write. And since they were the majority of the Southern population, it made the average literacy rate extremely low.
Since we're on the topic of reforms as a result of the Second Great Awakening, I'd like to hear all your thoughts on the temperance movement.
I thought it was pretty cool, especially since how those stupid immigrants, like the Irish and the Germans, brought over their excessive drinking habits.
Yeah, I really like the temperance movement society in 1826 and how it warned everybody about the horrors of drinking through propaganda.
Oh yeah, and Nadav, did you hear about the Maine Law in 1851 where they prohibited the making and sale of liquor?
Yeah, that one was cool.
Actually, I think the temperance movement was the least important reform in the 1800s, especially considering the abolitionist movement and the women's movement.
Yeah, I thought the movement to reform the role of women in society was pretty cool, especially how they did away with the idea of the cult of domesticity, where the home was a woman's sacred place, and introduced the idea of Republican motherhood, where children were raised to become good Republican citizens.
Yeah, especially with heroes like Lucretia Mott and Elizabeth Cady Stanton, who fought for women's suffrage rights.
Yep. And they did the Seneca Fall Convention in 1848 with the Declaration of Sentiments, where they demanded the right to vote for women. And this was a major milestone for the modern women's rights movement.
Yeah, but it was also overshadowed by the abolitionist movement.
And do you know the Quakers were the earliest opponents of slavery in the USA?
But what about the American Colonization Society? Those guys were kind of stupid. They wanted to take freed slaves back to Africa.
I don't think it worked that well.
Well, looking at prominent figures of the abolitionist movement, we have people like Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass.
Yeah. Did you hear about the new political party called the Liberty Party? It says that it's based solely off of abolitionist ideas.
Pretty sure it got absorbed into free soil, but okay.
Yeah, but all this talk made the South bite back with stuff like the gag resolution, where it was banned to talk about anti-slavery laws and slave codes in Congress.
Yeah, I really like those slave codes.
Nah. Okay, and now, a special guest on our show, Dorothea Dix. Welcome to the podcast, Miss Dix.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So, Dorothea, what did you do during the antebellum period?
Before the war, we treated the unfortunate in such an inhumane way, something had to be done. My first job was teaching prisoners where their treatment was so abysmal, I knew this was my calling. I began to travel across the country to explore the brutalities of our jail system. Prisons were unregulated and unhygienic, had violent criminals housed side by side with the mentally ill, and inmates were often subject to the brutalities of their jailers. I mean, I saw prisoners flogged, staved, chained, abused by their keepers, and left naked and without heat or sanitation. I presented all these claims to the Massachusetts legislature demanding reform. I said, I come to present the strong claims of suffering humanity. I come to place before the legislature of Massachusetts the condition of the miserable, the desolate, the outcast. I come as the advocate of helpless, forgotten, insane men and women, of being sunk to a condition from which the unconcerned world would start with real horror. Politicians did not agree with me, often ignoring me because I'm a woman, but I kept fighting. I tried to pass federal legislation that would create a national asylum, but my bill did not pass. My work set up funding for mental health hospitals and prisons all around the country and beyond. I helped establish asylums in New Jersey, North Carolina, and Illinois, made to aid the undeserved unfortunate.
So, how would you summarize your work during the Civil War?
I served as the superintendent of Army nurses for the Union Army, dedicating all I had to the cause of the North. I pushed for increased training and more opportunities for women in the war. I appointed over 3,000 nurses for the Union Army. I even treated Confederate soldiers. I believe every American deserves equal medical treatment.
That was great, Dorothea, really. So, what are your goals for the future?
I would like to build monuments to honor the deceased soldiers, the young children who gave up their lives for the war, and for the greater cause. I will keep fighting for social reforms for the unfortunate, improving conditions for the mentally ill, and building humane and functioning prisons and hospitals. This is the cause I believe in, and I will work to accomplish these goals till the day I die.
Audience with?
This sentiment of satisfaction in being useful, the guardian of the insane cannot too carefully watch over and foster, since it leads to self-control and self-respect. Incurables who are able and willing to work are much more content and enjoy better health when employed.
Well, thank you, Ms. Dix. I would like to mention that Ms. Dix greatly popularized the reforms for mentally ill, improving conditions in mental asylums and prisons across the country. Additionally, thanks to her work, old hospitals were redesigned and rededicated according to her ideals, and new hospitals were founded in accordance with the principles she spread.
And with that message, that will conclude today's podcast from the Bellum Bros. And remember, the nation during the antebellum period was not as unified as you'd think. So, thanks for spending your time with us. And as always, have a good night.